Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Friends of Flight 93 virtual speaker series. On behalf of the Friends, I'd like to welcome you to today's program. My name is Brooke Neal, and I'm the Director of Programs. The Friends of Flight 93 is the nonprofit partner to the National Park Service at Flight 93 National Memorial. We provide resources and volunteer support as well as raise funds to ensure the memorial maintains its relevancy. One of the many education programs that we support is the speaker series. And during this special 20th commemoration, the lecture series will showcase the families of Flight 93 to showcase their loved ones, the passengers and crew members of Flight 93, to share how the events of 9/11 changed their lives and the country. If you want to, you can submit some questions through the questions panel or type some chat messages, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end of the program. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Gordie Felt. He's our guest speaker today. So Gordie, hello and good evening.
Hi, hello everybody out there. It's such an honor to be here and have the ability to speak to people tonight.
So Gordie will be discussing the life and legacy of his brother, Edward Felt. So Gordie, we've listed out some of your bio there on the screen, but I thought it was important to showcase that you continue to work with schools, with civic groups and other organizations to play an active role in continuing the story of Flight 93 today. So we are going to discuss today Edward Felt. Ed was 41 years of age. He was a devoted to his wife and two daughters. And we've listed out a little bit about his bio there on the screen, but Gordie, I know on the 11th he was en route to San Francisco. Do you want to tell us a bit about your brother?
Sure. And thank you for listing that bio, although like most bios, it really can't do justice to the person behind the bio. I mean, plain and simple, Ed was extraordinary. He had a massive intellect, was so far beyond most of us in his capacity to compute and problem solve and think through difficult challenges. And it was really one thing that made him incredibly unique. But another aspect of Ed that made him so unique also was that he was a great communicator. And he was able to share ideas and talk to people at their level. And quite often, particularly when he was talking to his younger brother, he had to reduce his level to talk to my level. And he just had this gift to be able to speak with people, to mentor people. And what also was unique about Ed was that he really was the kind of person that seized every opportunity that he could and reveled in the experience, and whether that was professional or personal. Professionally, he worked for a company called BEA Systems. He was a technical engineer, right at the top of the company, and actually earned the distinction of being a distinguished member of the technical staff on some of the projects on which he worked. He was a holder of multiple patents, and again, I still don't know what he did, and it's hard to get anyone that can kind of explain it to you. But his expertise was in early internet financial transactions. When the internet was being established, there were a number of companies that were working on how to safely transfer funds across the internet, and 3 or 4 companies, and Ed was leading the team for his company to do that. So he was able to not only manage people, a large group of engineers, but also was able to take on special projects. And I think the company just let Ed think and let Ed vision the future. And he just loved, coming up with ideas and carried a little notebook with him where he would, jot down ideas, whether he's having dinner or having a conversation, he just would, an idea would strike and he would jot down a note and then get right back to what he was doing. But in terms of his seizing the opportunities on his personal side, one of my favorite stories about Ed is what I call the organic chemistry story. Ed went to Colgate University, then on to Cornell University, where he studied computer sciences. But while he was an undergraduate, his roommate was a pre-med major and had to take organic chemistry and knew it was going to be a real struggle. So Ed, who was a computer science major and a math major, and certainly didn't need to take organic chemistry, told his roommate that he'd help him. He'd take the course with them because Ed he loved to learn. He loved to learn about anything. And he took the course and he got his roommate through, and it was a wonderful story, other than the fact that he ruined the curve, because when it came time to finals, Ed aced it. And all these pre-med majors that needed to get an average up to apply to medical school were a bit upset because Ed, as I said, he ruined the curve because he was able to ace the material. Ed was one to help people. He was one to help individuals, help his community. We grew up in a household where civic duty wasn't an option. It was a responsibility. Our parents were both very involved in the community, and the three boys in my family, Ed, Larry, my brother, and myself, grew up watching our parents be involved. Ed was deeply involved in his community, in his church, and in helping people. And certainly, Ed had no greater love than his daughters and his wife. And it was magical to watch him with his family, to watch the extent that he would go to seize opportunities with his daughters. If they wanted to, they wanted to run, and they were runners when they were younger. So Ed took up running. When they started taking piano lessons, Ed took piano lessons because he wanted to experience those activities with his daughters. And that was just who he was. He was, as I said, extraordinary in every way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to shift right now, to the day of September 11th. So those of us who are alive, we remember that day and where we were and what was happening. So can you talk about the day of 9/11 and the immediate aftermath and coming to Somerset, PA for the first time? Where were you and how did you find out about Ed?
Sure. Well, my wife and I and our two daughters live up in central New York. We, for years, ran a residential summer camp. And on September 11th, 2001, I woke up, as we all did, to a beautiful blue sky day. Up here in the Adirondacks, it was gorgeous. I went from my house up to camp, was driving down or walking along the main road in our campground, and our maintenance director pulls up and rolls down the window and says, "Do you know what's going on?" And I wasn't listening to the radio. I was outdoors. I was doing some work, and he rolled his window down, and we listened into the radio, and we heard about the beginnings of the attacks in New York City. I called my wife. She came up to camp. We got a TV and we watched everything unfold. We watched the towers come down. At that point, I wasn't aware of Ed's role in this. I knew he was traveling, but who would have, with thousands and thousands of people traveling, this isn't going to happen to me kind of mentality, or my brother, or any of those other 40 heroes on Flight 93. But it wasn't until I got the first phone call from my sister-in-law, Sandy, and she said, Ed's traveling. I haven't heard from him. He's on, flying United. I'm trying to get in touch with them. If I hear anything, I will let you know. We got off the phone. I called Ed on his cell phone and left a message and said, "Look, Ed, when you land, call us. We're all concerned." And then it wasn't, too many hours later that Sandy called back and confirmed that Ed was on, Flight 93, and that there were, no survivors. And at that point, she asked if I would go down and tell my mother. You can imagine. I mean, that's, I can imagine losing a loved one, losing a son, losing a husband, losing a father. And my wife and I went down and we let my mom know that Ed was gone. And from there, our lives changed. I mean, all of our lives changed. Everyone in this country and around the world, our lives have changed. We live differently now. But as family members, it's deep and it's personal and it hurts and it still hurts and it always will hurt. And from that moment, we felt a loss. Obviously, a huge hole ripped into our hearts. We were invited down to the crash site a few weeks later, once the FBI released the crash site to Wally Miller, the county coroner. Family members came down and we were put up at Seven Springs, where we gave DNA samples, where we congregated to get information. The Red Cross was there taking care of us. There was a lot of media there, but I have to say they were extraordinarily respectful. They kept their distance from the families. And as I look back to that experience, it's a fog. I mean, I couldn't tell you the times of days, when things happened. I couldn't really talk about the specifics because I honestly don't recall. And I don't know if that was a matter of just being in shock and trying to repress some of those memories. But one of the first recollections that shines through so brightly was really a pivotal moment for me and for many of the families. And there were hundreds of us that were there. They put us on coach buses to drive us out to the crash site. And I remember clearly riding through rural southwestern Pennsylvania on country roads and looking out the windows and seeing families with children waving flags, first responders saluting, parents holding up signs, all out of respect for our loved ones and just embracing us in this love that they reached out to us to support us in our time. And that was pretty much the whole way, as I recall, out to the crash site. And then when we got to the crash site, we got off the buses and we were kind of up on a hill looking down to the crater. Again, it was fenced off. And at that point, I don't recall much of the experience other than seeing the crater. I think for many families, we were still withdrawn into ourselves, into our individual family units, and hadn't begun to make these connections with each other. But certainly that experience of riding over on the bus and seeing what we saw and experiencing that together, I think for many of us, it was a moment of clarity where we came to realize that our loss was more than just the loss of my brother or the loss of a father or a daughter, or it was a loss that was going to be shared with the nation. It was a loss that everyone was experiencing. Now, granted, we were experiencing in a very personal way, but I think everyone that at that time was experiencing that loss. And when you talk to families about those first experiences that we had in Somerset County, you're just going to hear endless stories of how this community embraced us, how they loved us, and we are forever indebted to them for that. And I don't think we could even comprehend what they were doing for us at first. Again, because many of us were just in this incredible shock and were in pain and mourning. But they supported us. They were the ones that stood there, those first ambassadors that picked up the mantle the story of our loved ones. They wanted to make sure that site was that remained intact. And certainly, there's no greater champion than Wally Miller, the county coroner, who was fierce to help protect and honor the 40 heroes of Flight 93. And this community, they loved us. They became fierce advocates for the story. And for that, we will forever be in their debt. I mean, there's no doubt that we couldn't have achieved what we've achieved over these past 19 years to establish this memorial if it wasn't for the community. They were the bedrock on which this memorial was built. Again, we went to potluck dinners. We went to vigils that were being held. I mean, they couldn't have done enough. They could have done any more for us than they did. I mean, they were just so extraordinary. From organizations, from individuals, as I said, Wally Miller, business leaders, Henry Cook. I mean, spectacular. We found a home away from home, at the Hampton Inn, where many of us stay when we come back, at the Pine Grill, where many of us go and have meals together. It's like going to a living room, and having a meal with your family. And it's just, we've always felt so welcome, and the Somerset community has become so important to all of us.
Right. And it's still like that today. I know when all of you come back, even around the 11th. You touched on something that, I want to go into, which is the development of the memorial, and like you were saying, the relationships and the different partnerships. Can you talk about each organization in creating the memorial and how they each brought a critical perspective and role?
Sure. Well, the local community and certainly the federal government realized very quickly that this site needed to be preserved and protected. And Congress, thankfully, started to work on the Flight 93 National Memorial Act, which was signed into law in September of 2002. And what was critical about that was that act established a structure under which a memorial could be built that was overseen by a federal advisory commission. It also established a task force, which was really the grassroots organization that got this project off the ground. And it was a task force comprised of local community members. It was comprised of family members, specialists from all over the country, historians that came together to serve on the task force. And while the task force was kind of beginning that work, these other partner groups were lining themselves up. The National Park Service, certainly the families of Flight 93, came into existence. And the Friends of Flight 93, the National Park Foundation. Over the years, we've had these wonderful teams of people that have come together to create this memorial. What has been an unbelievably, I've been using the word extraordinary tonight frequently because this has been an extraordinary process. But one extraordinary aspect of this partnership is that there have been various times during the past 19, nearly 20 years when we have come across challenges that seemed insurmountable, whether it had to do with fundraising or land acquisition or policy issues, appropriations issues. Through this partnership that is really encompassing public sector, private sector, family members, there was always someone who was able to step up, to take the lead, to get us over that hurdle so that we can start running towards the next one. And this was a process time and time again that we saw the right people at the right time to do the right thing. And throughout this challenge of creating a memorial, there seems to have been a guiding principle, an awareness or almost a mantra that I think helped us achieve what we were able to achieve, again, under some of the most difficult conditions. And in that mantra, that principle was any challenges that we faced in making this memorial paled in comparison to what the heroes of Flight 93 faced on September 11th. And it's amazing when things are tough and you're thinking this isn't going to happen, you just think about those 40 heroes, and suddenly you've got energy, and suddenly a path to the answer, through hard work, appears. And it's been a motivating factor for many of us up to this point, and I suspect and I hope for many of us for the rest of our lives. We'll continue to allow anyone that comes to this memorial to think about that as we approach life's difficult moments.
Right, and talk a bit about the critical themes like we have listed there on the screen about community, democracy, multinational themes that are a part of the Flight 93 story.
Sure. Well, I think one of the most significant themes of this memorial is that at a moment's notice, 40 relative strangers, because you have to remember, while there were a few passengers and certainly the crew members that knew each other, many of the people on this flight were, they didn't know anyone else on the flight. They were on business, like Ed, who's going to San Francisco on business. So when they first understood what was going on, they came together at a moment's notice. Strangers were able to come together and fight an evil that was thrust upon them. And in doing so, essentially defeated that evil on a day when our country received a body blow like never before, certainly within the contiguous United States. And it was unique. It was inspiring. They didn't concern themselves with religious differences. They didn't concern themselves with race or cultural differences or professional issues or nationalities or political differences, sexual orientations, or any of the the ageism or any other isms that seem to really polarize us in this country. They were united very quickly by a deep desire to do what was right. What was not what was easy. They could have sat back, but they chose not to. And in choosing not to, they changed history. Just imagine the consequence of them sitting back and letting the terrorists dictate the end of their lives. My brother and the 39 other people on that plane, they said, "Not on our watch, not today. We're coming for you." And that's inspiring. Because imagine how even more different our world would be now if on the evening of September 11th, 2001, there was an image of the Capitol dome collapsed, on fire, rubble. I have to think that our government would have acted differently. What would have potentially been left of our government. I have to think that our lives would be far more different and far more changed than they already were. Imagine if our leaders today could actually be inspired by these lessons and learn how to work together. We can only hope.
Couldn't have said it better, Gordie. We're going to transition for a second and talk about the families of Flight 93 and, the creation of that organization.
Well, thankfully, very early on, we had a couple of family members that saw a need to organize. We all I think felt that if there was going to be a memorial, we wanted to have some input. But thankfully, Jennifer Price, our first president of the family organization, Larry Catuzzi, our first vice president, and he was actually the co-chair of the task force, Betty Kemmerer, these family members realized that we would have to create an organizational structure that would give us a position, a legitimacy to be able to sit and take part, have a seat at the table. So they took the initial steps to create the Families of Flight 93, which was a 501c3 non-for-profit charitable organization. Every family member, it was a non-membership organization, so every family member with we had a description of what that meant, but was a part of that organization. And the concept was presented to our families at the first anniversary. And I remember as they were talking about this structure, they asked for volunteers. They asked if there were up to 15 people that would like to serve on the board. And thankfully, we had 15 people that volunteered. And from there, we met for our first organizational board meeting in a very snowy day in Pittsburgh in December of 2002, and that's when we formally organized and began our journey. And I think what has been wonderful about this experience is that we've had 30 different family members representing over half of the passengers and crew members serve on our board. And it has always been our goal to represent the entire group. And we've worked very hard to be inclusive, and we've worked very hard to listen and to hear and to represent and to have a seat at the table. And not just a seat where we would listen and get briefed and updated, but we made sure that it was a very active seat at the table. And over the years, there's been a solid core of family members, Carol O'Hare, Ed Root, Patrick White, Kenny Nackey, Calvin Wilson, Hamilton Peterson, just to name a few, but that have been there and been making our presence known. And I think for the benefit of the project, to provide perspective, but also there were many times when the families were able, just because of the nature of our organization, were able to clear some of those hurdles that I talked about before. The right people were there at the right time, and many of those right people were different family members that were able to step up and help us achieve our goals. So that seat at the table was far more than ceremonial, and I have to say, to this day, we have been treated with nothing but respect from our partners. We've been challenged at times, just as we've challenged them at times, but it has been a remarkable partnership, and one that I hope never has to be resurrected, for another instance such as this. But I think it's a model of how these types of organizations can work effectively.
So what's it been like over the past 20 years dealing with the media and, like you said, being a spokesperson for the organization?
Well, it's been a privilege, an absolute privilege, to be able to represent the families, but more importantly, to speak for those 40 heroes that aren't able to speak for themselves. And it's at the same time, it's a privilege I honestly wish I never had to have. But the reality is that 9/11 happened, and thankfully we have family members that were willing to step up. It is always humbling always an honor to speak on behalf of the families of Flight 93. And quite frankly, in many cases, it's quite surreal. Never would I have expected to be put in some of the positions, meeting some of the people, sitting in meetings and contributing in situations. I mean, it's humbling to say the least. My first experience speaking on behalf of the families came actually before our organization was formed. It happened that first visit down to Pennsylvania when we were staying at Seven Springs. After the visit to the site, the media asked if there were any family members that were willing to share a few thoughts and share some words. And I volunteered to do so. And again, that was one of those moments where I realized that this is far greater than anything I would ever have anticipated when I kind of walked through a door into a room of probably 40 or 50 cameras and microphones and held a press conference. That's nothing I was trained for, certainly nothing I was prepared for. But I thought it was important to let the world know that we weren't going to allow our loved ones to die in vain. That they were important as individuals. We were just learning the story at that point of what happened. I was concerned that at that first press conference about our government overreacting. And I wanted to, because Ed was a man of peace. Ed was a problem solver. He wasn't one to make quick judgments. He thought things through, and I thought that it would be important for me to let people know that that's who my brother was. So that was one of the themes that I spoke on at that first press conference. And from there it's been a roller coaster ride. Being able to speak at the commemoration services every year, not every year, but in many years, on behalf of the families. Some of the very unique honors that I've had is being able to accept the Congressional Gold Medal on behalf of the 40 crew members and passengers of Flight 93. Being able to speak at the dedication of the plaque in the Capitol building, being able to speak at the commissioning of the USS Somerset and getting to meet so many of those great people that serve in our military and serve on the USS Somerset, testifying before Congress. And I've really found a passion for advocating. We all have coped or tried to cope and process our loss in different ways. And loss is different for everybody. And I've found, for me, that being able to advocate for these passengers and crew members, being able to advocate for the memorial has helped me survive, helped me from going into a deep, dark place of anger and bitterness. And it's been very much a healing process. So I'm grateful for that opportunity, because I honestly believe that it's saved a portion of my soul to be able to do this. Just one other extraordinary experience that kind of brings a lot of this into perspective was a call that I got, I think it was about 11:30 one night in April of 2011 from Lisa Linden, who is a public relations, well, she's a friend, a very good friend to our families and to our organization, and guides us in terms of media and in public relations. And she called me one night at about 11:30 and she said, "Get up. The next 24 to 48 hours are going to be a roller coaster. They're about to announce that Osama bin Laden is dead. And there's going to be people that are going to want to hear what the families think and what you think about this." And she was right. It was about a 24-hour news cycle. Um, but again, it all goes back to that first view out the window of that bus, seeing children waving flags and hands over their hearts and signs, and this process is so much more than just personal to our families. It's certainly deeply personal because we lost loved ones, but it's personal to our country as well, what was done to us that day.
Right. And I mean, even speaking of media, this September is going to be the 20th commemoration. So I'm sure media requests have already been coming in, probably greater than since you've seen since the 10th anniversary, would you think?
Absolutely. The calls and the projects, the documentaries, those calls started soon after September last year. And I anticipate will only increase moving forward. We've actually created a list of family members that are interested in speaking to the media because there's 40 different family units out there, and everyone has a wonderful, unique story that they want to tell about their loved ones. Some families will speak, other families won't speak, and again, that's absolutely up to them. But I want to make sure that people have that opportunity. So we have been compiling a list, and we look forward to being able to share as many stories as possible with the media leading up to the 20th anniversary.
So talk to us a bit about just the families of Flight 93 sunsetting and your mission completed and your goals for this year.
Sure. When the families of Flight 93 began our journey back in December of 2002, we and all of the partnership, we really weren't able to predict where this journey was going to take us and how long it was going to get us, or how long it was going to take us to get there. And we watched this memorial unfold before our eyes. As a family organization, our commitment from the very beginning was that we wanted to be involved. We wanted to have a seat at the table. We wanted to help make the big decisions. We wanted to help raise the money. We wanted to help set policy. Family members were very involved in choosing the design on the two different juries. But we also knew that once we completed that goal, that it was time to step back. It was time to allow the National Park Service and now the Friends of Flight 93 to become the chief advocates for our loved ones, both on the National Park Service and the Friends from those two organizations. And what's wonderful about the Friends organization is that family members can join the Friends organization and can take part. And we've got family members on the Friends board, and I certainly encourage any family members that want to continue to be active in oversight of the memorial and active in programming and such to join the Friends and to take part through there. I mean, there always will be a need for family input. Right from the very beginning, Joanne Hanley, the first superintendent, Jeff Reinbold, the second superintendent, Steve Clark, our current superintendent, have always had an ear open, for the families, and actually proactively would call. And I talk to Steve all the time about the memorial. I know there's other family members that speak to him all the time as well, and he values that because he wants our perspective, because we have such a unique perspective, and we're not going to be around forever. And I think that it's important that we capitalize on what we have here and now to help assure that this memorial in perpetuity will be able to provide visitors with what they need: information about the day, information about the collective actions of our loved ones, also critical information about the individuals, who they were. And those are insights that come most directly and most accurately from family members. So we decided with the final dedication of the Tower of Voices that it was time. It was time for us to sunset our organization and to step back to a certain degree. In our final action as an organization, we established what we call the Legacy Fund. And it is a fund, a pool of dollars that when we sunsetted, we transferred over, that we had in our possession, we transferred over to the Friends organization to establish this legacy fund with the sole intent of making sure that the Wall of Names, that the Sacred Ground, and the Tower of Voices will never be in need of funding for maintenance, ongoing care. Now, we didn't turn these funds over to replace budgeted funds already, but rather to supplement those funds. So it is a fund where we're actively seeking to raise additional funds on top of the seed money that the families have given to the Friends, so that we know in perpetuity that we're not going to have to worry. That's our legacy to our loved ones. And for those that aren't directly related to those loved ones, it's our country's legacy to the heroes of Flight 93. So we can assure that forever, when people come to the Flight 93 National Memorial and they look out on that sacred ground and they look at that Wall of Names and they hear the Tower of Voices chimes representing the voices of our loved ones, that they are going to be witnessing the majesty and kind of the dignity and the respect and the honor that these 40 extraordinary people deserve. I mean, they are part of our nation's history, woven into the fabric of the history of our country because of their heroic actions that morning.
Well said. So these the next two questions come from your oral history, and I thank you and the National Park Service for letting me read that. So the first question is, how do you feel the past and future of the memorial is going?
I am so optimistic about this memorial. I always have been, but you know, the way that this has turned out is incredible. You know, when we first saw the drawings, when we had the design competition, 1,000 entries whittled down to 5 finalists, and then the winning design is selected, and then Paul Murdoch, the design architect that put this project together with his team, drew very detailed images of what his vision was for this memorial. What the visitor center is going to look like, and what the Wall of Names and the Sacred Ground is going to look like. And every time we saw a picture, and then when we saw that picture translated into actual buildings, actual elements of the design built before our eyes, we got exactly what we were promised. And I'm so thankful that we had a team in place that was dedicated and was committed to creating a world-class memorial. And there's no doubt that is what we got. And I think that well, I know when I'm there and I hear visitors and I hear their comments and I hear children talking about the day, asking questions, and I hear the ambassadors and the National Park staff answering questions and interacting with the public, I know it's exactly what we were looking for. I know that the story of Ed and the 39 other heroes is safe. It's there. And it will always be there. And through programming such as this and other programs that the Friends are offering, that the stories are going to continue to be told so that we don't forget, because we don't want to, we can't afford to.
So the second question is, what do you think the legacy of the passengers and crew members means to the country and the world?
Well, we know that the lessons and the actions of these 40 heroes have already inspired people to take action on airplanes that may have been tried to be hijacked. And it's a whole new world. And, we don't sit back. They stood up and did what they needed to do to save themselves on some of these flights and some of these situations with the shoe bomber and other difficult situations. So we know that already they've inspired action to do what's right, not what's easy. But it's always been my goal is that when people come and they visit the Flight 93 National Memorial and they walk through the visitor center and they learn about the day and they walk down to the wall of names and they look out over the sacred ground and they stop and listen to the chimes at the Tower of Voices, that they absorb not just the facts of the day, but the essence of who these people were and what they did. And I hope that when people leave on their way out or when they get home or wherever they're going on their life's journey, they ask themselves, if that was me, could I have done what they did that morning? And I hope that none of us will ever be put in that situation. But I like to hope that many of us hope, and we'll never know unless we're put in that situation, but hope that we could rise to the challenge as our loved ones did that morning. And I think that's one of the motivating factors, and one of the lessons, one of the themes that I want people when they leave to take with them from the Flight 93 National Memorial.
So let's talk a bit about Ed's family. What are his wife, Sandy, and his two daughters doing now?
Well, they're doing well. They're doing well. Life's not easy. Life's not easy for any of us. We talk about how, we and they in particular as a family have moved forward. Certainly, they haven't moved on because we'll never move on. I mean, this has become who we are. We lost a father, a husband, a brother, a son with Ed, and it's challenging. But I have to say, I know how proud I am of Sandy and Adrian and Catherine because I've seen struggles. I think we all have struggled, and I've seen accomplishments, and I've seen that drive to move forward, not on. And I can only, I know how proud I am, and I can only imagine how proud my brother is of everything that they're doing. One of the things that I think many people needed to do after September 11th was to find a way to make sense of a senseless situation. It didn't make sense. Why Ed? But if we didn't find a way forward, we would have been overwhelmed with anger and fear and hate and all these emotions that are clearly not healthy. Sandy has found a passion for photography that has enabled her to express herself. I think she's I don't know if she is surprised at how talented she is, or she always knew she had a talent for it, but she is amazing with the photography work that she does. Ed and Sandy's eldest daughter, Adrian, followed in Ed's footsteps, has a PhD in computer engineering, and she is a lead engineer in the Google Chrome project. An extraordinary, talented, gifted young woman. She and her husband Mark have a 4-year-old son named Emerson, and this is where the tragedy continues. Emerson will never meet his grandfather. And he started to ask questions. And how do you explain this? How do you explain it to a child? The purity of childhood. And it's a delicate question that has to be addressed, certainly, but it's never easy. Catherine, Ed and Sandy's youngest, is now a doctoral candidate in piano performance, an adjunct professor of music at Rutgers University. Catherine's way to process and to move forward has to become this amazingly accomplished pianist. And some families may remember years ago she performed at a family organization long before I think could have envisioned where she would end up with her music. But she still is on that journey and incredibly gifted and going places. And again, I couldn't be prouder of how they are doing.
Great. So our last topic here is the memorial that was dedicated last year in Ed's memory in your hometown. So can you explain a bit about that and what it means to your family?
Sure. Ed, Larry, and I grew up in a small community called Clinton, New York, in central New York. Went to high school there, off to college, and then we kind of all went off in our own life journeys from that point. I was contacted by some wonderful men from Clinton, part of the Clinton Fire Department, that said, you know something, we need to have a memorial for your brother, for what he did on September 11th, in a place where the community can remember September 11th as a whole. And they asked certainly if that would be okay with the family, and certainly it was really an honor that they would consider that. And they put together a committee and worked with the Clinton Central School District and the Alumni Association from the Clinton Central School District, and created a beautiful memorial that's on the school grounds in what they call the Memorial Garden in Clinton. And it is, we worked with the National Park Service to put the wording together on the plaque that was erected next to the bench, the memorial bench that was dedicated, telling the story of Flight 93 and Ed. And right underneath the bench, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little stone that's under the bench that's behind plexiglass that came from came from Somerset County as part of and built into this community, from that community to our community. And it is a wonderful tribute to Ed. And it's a place where the students at Clinton Central can go and they can learn about the day and ask questions. And it really, for our family, is quite an honor that they recognized Ed in this manner.
So I think we're going to move on to a Q&A session with our audience. But first, is there anything that you'd like to say to everyone attending here today?
Just, I appreciate the opportunity to tell the story. I mean, we need to continue to tell these stories, to let the world know that September 11th isn't just a paragraph in a history book. September 11th is real. Real people died. Real people were murdered that day. Real people also rose to the challenge. Think about first responders, firefighters running into buildings in New York City and at the Pentagon. The first responders in Somerset County that had no idea what to expect, but selflessly, ran out to that site and then worked on that site. The FBI that was there, and then the community in Somerset County that will forever be changed. But spoke volumes about who they were, who they wanted to be, what they wanted to do to be able to tell this story. So I encourage people to continue to talk about September 11th, for family members to continue to talk about your loved ones, each individual. They were important. We need to hear the stories so that future generations never forget. And thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.
Great. Well, as you said it, we're lucky that we still have first-person accounts of, this history to tell. So I'd ask the audience to ensure that, the stories continue and remain relevant and accessible to new generations. You can become a Friends member, as you can see on our slide here, and you can donate to support our education outreach efforts and by going to our website there. So Danny, if you want to unmute yourself, we can go ahead and ask a few questions here.
My apologies. I was typing a question or an answer to somebody who had sent one in. We do have a few questions here. One is, with the generations that have obviously been born since September 11th, 2001, what do you feel is a way for us to continue to keep the story relevant for children who have no memory of this event?
Well, I think it's critical that we advocate for education in schools that can help future generation of children understand September 11th. But I also think in doing so, we want to make sure that it's factually based education, that we're not rewriting history, that we are talking about the day as it was in September of 2001. What's been wonderful about the Flight 93 National Memorial is the Oral History Project, where we have hundreds and hundreds of oral histories that have been given, that have been recorded, that will be in an archive for students, educators, research professionals to go back and continue to glean information about who they were, that we lost on that day, who we were, who felt that loss so dearly, who the community was that experienced the tragedy in their backyard. So education is clearly the way that we perpetuate this story. In figuring out ways we can get kids to the memorial or online for programs such as this, so that they can take part in the dialogue and learn.
Thank you. Another question was, besides the last time you remember seeing Ed, what one-on-one situation do you have with him that will always be imprinted in your mind?
Oh, there's so many. We'd get together for our kids' birthday parties, holidays. You're just sitting around the table and talking and laughing. Ed had this amazing capacity to be able to turn off the intellectual genius, not turn it off, but tone it down, and he had just a great sense of humor about him, and I just cherish those memories of just those times with family, sitting around the table and talking.
Is there one more question, Danny? We might have lost Danny. That's all right. I want to thank you again, Gordie, for your time tonight, and thank everyone for attending the virtual speaker series. As we've noted, we're approaching 20 years since the 9/11 attacks this September, so we encourage you to honor and remember the 40 heroes from wherever you are. And lastly, we'll be holding another digital program next month. Our theme this year is to feature the families of Flight 93, so we hope you'll join us again next month, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.